2022 is finally coming to a close. This past year, we held the national elections and welcomed a new administration, faced the new normal, went back to school, and opened our doors to the world amid the COVID-19 pandemic, among others. But before we welcome the new year, let us look back at the events, struggles, and milestones that we Filipinos faced together. Some we have triumphantly overcome, while we continue our journey towards the coming year with hope for better things to come. In 2022, the Pna Newsroom brings you stories that inspire change. This year, the country witnessed major developments, from the change of administration leadership to calamities, enhanced bilateral ties, COVID-19 response and recovery efforts, and more. The details from Marita Mawahe.
2022 opened opportunities for more Filipinos to slowly rebuild their lives and accept the new normal as more establishments were allowed to open and entry restrictions to the country slowly eased. In the third year of the pandemic, the government continuously ramped up its COVID-19 vaccination drive, including the administration of booster shots to sustain the reopening of the economy. This year also marked the country's change of leadership, with President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. taking the helm after his landslide win during the national elections, together with Sara Duterte, daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte, as the vice president. Upon assuming office on June 30, Marcos vowed to bring about economic transformation as he expressed support for the creation of the Bulacan Airport City Special Economic Zone, among others. He makes agriculture his top priority, pushes for more tourism-driven infrastructure projects, and approved the resumption of face-to-face classes. Meanwhile, Marcos personally led the distribution of relief goods to Abra residents when a strong quake jolted the province and remained on top of the situation. During the onslaught of Typhoon Karding and Tropical Depression Neneng and Paeng, the government's relief efforts were further intensified. The Sugar Regulatory Administration under the Department of Agriculture went under fire with approval of the importation of 300,000 metric tons of sugar. The fiasco led to courtesy resignations of involved officials, as the president apparently did not approve such nor authorized anyone to sign on his behalf. Meanwhile, Marcos met with several state leaders, including U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, among others, in Malacanang in a bid to bolster Philippine ties with other countries. He also attended several summits abroad, like the ASEAN Summit in Cambodia and the APEC Summit in Thailand, boosted ties with Vietnam, and expressed concern over the ongoing conflict in Myanmar. During these important meetings, more world leaders expressed support and committed to working closely with the Philippine government to achieve economic growth, peace, and stability. Bilateral ties were also signed with Indonesia, Singapore, and France. Marcos addressed the UN General Assembly in New York and held sideline talks with the Japanese Prime Minister and other world leaders. Some important projects were also launched within the year that include the Kadiwa ng Pasko and the Pambansang Pabahay para sa Pilipino program. Overall, the president's foreign visits to various countries this year yielded some $23.6 billion worth of investment pledges, according to the year-end report of the Department of Trade and Industry. These are from his foreign trips to Indonesia, Singapore, the United States, Cambodia, and Thailand, on top of the 9.8 billion peso investment pledges from his trip to Brussels, Belgium. I'm Marita Mawahe for the Pna Newsroom Year-End Report.
The Marcos administration begins as learners and teachers finally return to school for face-to-face classes. What were the steps that were undertaken by the government to ensure quality education in a post-pandemic school year? Wilnard Barcelona reports.
One of the hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic is the education sector. To effectively address the country's education woes, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. designated Vice President Sara Duterte Carpio as Education Secretary. Duterte vowed to reform the Department of Education in line with the Basic Education Development Plan. She said she aims to produce learners who can achieve their full potential to achieve their dreams for themselves and for the country. The school year 2022 to 2023 started on August 22, with schools transitioning to full face-to-face classes by November 2. At that time, minimum levels of proficiency have dropped among students in the past 2 years, a matter worsened by the physical closure of schools. During his inauguration, Marcos pledged to reform the Philippine education system with emphasis on the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics strand. As mandated by the President, the DepEd has been strengthening the education system to prepare Filipino children wherever they go. Among the reforms targeted by the administration was the review of the K-12 education program and the preparation of the National Learning Recovery Plan to address learning deficiencies due to pandemic-related disruptions. The DepEd said the proposed policy is anchored on learning remediation and intervention, professional development, health, safety, and mental wellness. Meanwhile, the Marcos administration would also focus on the welfare of teachers. This December, over 11,500 teachers were hired, while 5,000 administrative officer items were created to unburden teachers with administrative loads. A significant milestone of the education sector is the inclusion of funding for special education or SPED worth 581 million pesos and for learners with disabilities in the DepEd's budget for 2023. 154 million pesos was also allocated for indigenous people's education. The DepEd said this would ensure accessible, quality basic education for the Filipino youth that is both inclusive and empowering. Meanwhile, teachers and students were encouraged to learn disaster preparedness through unannounced fire and earthquake drills. To spread dental health awareness and mold the character and well-being of teachers, the DepEd plans to implement mandatory toothbrush drills as part of basic education in school year 2024 to 2025. I'm Wilnard Basilonia for the Pna Newsroom Year-End Report.
The agriculture sector, being the top priority of the Marcos administration, has ramped up its efforts in a bid to achieve food security in the country. No less than President Ferdinand R. Marcos himself sits as Agri-Chief to ensure that government efforts will be maximized for the benefits of all Filipinos. Let's find out the challenges and triumphs in the agri-sector from Stephanie Sevillano.
The year 2022 was indeed one challenging year in the agriculture sector, as it started the year with the havoc brought by Typhoon Odette in December of 2021, causing more than 29 billion pesos worth of damage to both the agriculture and infrastructure sector. In April, Typhoon Agaton caused massive flooding in Maguindanao, while a flash flood occurred in Banaue in July due to heavy rains. Other severe tropical storms that hit the country include Florita, Typhoons Henry and Carding, as well as Typhoon Neneng. Meanwhile, the agriculture sector also finds ways to eradicate African swine fever, or ASF, as it struggles to temper prices of farm and fishery products amid the oil crisis brought on by the Russia and Ukraine war. With the assumption of President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. as the country's 17th president, he immediately took over the helm of the DA. He also ordered the review of the rice tariffication law, government purchase of fertilizers, and seeks measures that will boost the production of agricultural staples in the country to make rice more affordable for the people. Being the top priority of the administration, the president urged Congress to pass a law condoning the existing agrarian reform loan to unburden farmers from their loans and interests. Intensified campaign against smuggling and hoarding also took place this year, with a series of warehouse inspections done in coordination with the Bureau of Customs. These led to the discovery and destruction of some 12,000 kilograms of smuggled white onions in Surigao, and the anti-sugar hoarding drive in Manila and other parts of the country. Before the year ends, some 20 million worth of red onions were also seized. In November, Marcos rolled out the Kadiwa ng Pasko Caravan to make prices of basic commodities more affordable to the people by directly bridging farmers to the consumers. The project received the public's nod as it garnered an 84% approval rating from the Filipino people. I am Stephanie Sevillano for the Pna Newsroom Year-End Report.
Since his inauguration, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. committed to boosting the Philippines' tourism industry as the country reopens to the world. To promote the country as a re-emerging tourist destination towards a post-pandemic recovery, the Marcos administration has taken a whole-of-country approach. Benj Bondo has the story.
Another priority of the Marcos administration is to reboot the Philippines' tourism industry as the country reopens its doors to tourists amid the COVID-19 pandemic. In his first State of the Nation address, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. cited the role of tourism in economic development and job creation. Marcos expressed the need to welcome the world with a unique, attractive, and creative brand of tourism that is deeply rooted in cultural heritage. He also urges Filipinos to patronize the country's tourist destinations and adjusted holidays in 2023 to give people long weekends to do so. Taking the President's cue, the Department of Tourism vowed to make the Philippines a tourism powerhouse. Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco said that among the DOT's priorities are the improvement of tourism infrastructure and accessibility, enhancement of overall tourist experience, and promoting and uplifting the quality of the Filipino brand. To diversify the country's tourism portfolio, the DOT encouraged the development of urban parks and open spaces. To further revitalize Philippine tourism, Filipinos, especially those overseas, were given the role of becoming the country's ambassadors. Its latest promotion, the Bisita Be My Guest or BBMG program, seeks to invite and entice foreigners to visit the country. Foreign invitees who have traveled to the Philippines from January 1, 2023 to April 30, 2024 may win prizes such as a condominium unit, a car, and travel packages. Amid efforts to reopen the country, tourism earnings as of October this year reached 130 billion pesos, while arrivals climbed to more than 2.39 million. Frasco said the easing of travel restrictions and health protocols had contributed to the high tourism revenues and arrivals. This year's arrivals exceeded previous projections of 1.7 million by the end of this year. For 2023, the DOT targets 4.8 million foreign visitor arrivals and up to $5.8 billion in revenues. Frasco is optimistic that with the administration's focus on tourism and travel, Manila could even surpass the pre-pandemic tourism figures before 2025. I'm Benj Bondok for the PNA Newsroom Year-End Report.
And that is the biggest stories from the past year from the PNA Newsroom. For more news content, visit our webpage or head on to the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. We are also shown on the social media pages of the Office of the Press Secretary and on Radio Pilipinas RP1. And as we welcome the year 2023, join us as we look forward to a brighter and more prosperous future with a nation united in peace, with stories that will continue to inspire change. I am William Theo. From all of us at the Philippine News Agency and of course our program, the PNA Newsroom, a Happy New Year to everyone.